Welcome to Film Detour, a podcast where two longtime film buddies take you down and around the back alleys and side streets of cinema.
With the occasional left-hand turn.
I'm John Napick.
And I'm Bob Mueller. So let's go. John, you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's hit it.
So this is a 20th Century Fox film shot at Shepperton Studios.
It's brilliant.
It's The Innocents, 1961, directed by Jack Clayton, who is a great English director. Lots of great stuff.
A lot of producing, though. He did mostly producing, and he directed some films, but this is really his first film, to the best of my knowledge, that he directed.
No, he did one before this.
Did he? Okay.
Room at the Top with Lawrence Harvey and Simone Signoret. Another interesting adult film. He also did The Great Gatsby, believe it or not, with Robert Redford and Mia Farrow.
He didn't direct that.
Yeah.
He directed that?
He directed that.
I did not know that.
Written by Francis Ford Coppola.
Right. Coppola said he used all the wrong lenses. He did say that. Because it didn't go over very well.
I mean, he did a lot of stuff. Another one he did.
Something Wicked This Way Comes. Unfortunately, that's one of my favorite all-time books.
Yeah.
Ray Bradbury. It's a magnificent book, but it just does not translate to the screen. I have to say that Jason Robards is perfect.
So this film does have a bunch of heavy hitters. I'll just start with cinematography. Freddie Francis.
Freddie Francis. He was also a well-known director. After a period of time, he became a director doing a lot of the Amicus films.
Yeah, like some of his early films were Saturday Night and Sunday Morning. You ever see that?
I did not see that.
That's a great English kind of kitchen sink drama. He shot The Elephant Man.
Yeah, and that's what makes it look amazing. It looks so beautiful in black and white.
Dune, another film for David Lynch, surprisingly.
He shot the theatrical version of Dune, you're right.
And French Lieutenant's Women.
That's a beautiful film. Yeah. I totally forgot he did that.
And he won an Oscar for Glory.
Talk about a spanning career of so many decades. That's really amazing.
Interestingly, all these movies, and even won an Oscar for Glory, he did consider The Innocents one of his favorite films.
You take a look at this movie, every frame is beautiful. And I have to say that Jack Clayton's eye for setting shots up and moving the camera, oh my God.
Yeah.
So this guy produced a lot of stuff. He certainly was keeping an eye on what to do and how to do it, but he did a beautiful job directing this.
I mean, the original
Henry
story
James
is from Henry James.
Turn of the
Screw.
Right.
Jack Clayton read that as a young person and always loved this story, always wanted to do it. So it must have been brewing in his head for a long time, but he totally nails it. So again, as we said, this is an adaptation of Turn of the Screw, written by William Archibald and
Truman Capote.
Wow, right? Like out of nowhere.
And the interesting thing is, and I can't say, I can't take a pair of tweezers and just go, okay, this was Capote's thing too. But there are certain eerie elements and some sorted elements that I have a funny feeling that Truman Capote had something to do with.
Well, the original writer was William Archibald because he wrote a theater piece, a play, based on, which was actually popular, I think, based on Turn of the Screw. But they brought in Capote, I think, because they needed help with the dialogue.
When I think of Truman Capote, I automatically think of In Cold Blood.
Right.
And for a period of time, I lived out in rural Kansas. Yeah. And I made the mistake of watching that movie with my wife one night. We're out in the middle of nowhere, and I thought, this is a really stupid idea.
That is a scary movie.
It's chilling.
Yes.
It's chilling. And the way Capote can do that sort of thing with his writing, he totally does it in this film.
Well, apparently he was writing the book at the same time, and he took a 3-week break to work on this film.
You're kidding.
Because he did work for years on that book. It wasn't like a quick thing.
Sure.
So it did happen simultaneously.
Well, I'm telling you, the feeling I got watching In Cold Blood, you get that same up the back of your neck, into your spine, chills.
Yeah. So let's just go step back a little bit. The cinematography, Freddie Francis shot it. It's in CinemaScope. It's a widescreen black and white film.
And Clayton's eye, to fill up that scene, mise en scène, as the French say.
Yes.
Every inch of that widescreen frame is filled with stuff that should be there. And I've seen this movie several times.
Yeah.
And every time I watch it, John, I see more stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel more stuff and I hear more stuff. It's like an onion. It's multi-layered. It's got stuff packed in this.
Right. Some of certainly the night scenes, they did want to close the frame in, so Freddie Francis hand-painted the edges of the frame. The effect was it darkened the edges of the film, and you can see it in some night scenes, so that it's like they're surrounded by darkness in certain areas.
And the music. The music is by a French composer. His name is George Auric. He did Cocteau's Beauty and the Beast, and he did Wages of Fear and Moulin Rouge, just to name 3. He had a long, long career, and the music is so haunting in this movie. We got Deborah Kerr.
Such a great actress.
Yeah.
In tons of films, we can't even begin to name them all. But From Here to Eternity,
Right.
with Burt Lancaster.
Right.
Heaven Knows Mr. Allison. And what else? Black Narcissus. It's a Michael Powell.
Right.
Pressburger film.
We have Peter Wyngarde, who plays Peter Quint,
Yes.
which we'll get to as the time goes on. Martin Stevens as Miles. Oh my God!
Okay, so this movie has 2 young kids in it.
I mean,
And-
really, I've never seen such incredible. Bill Mumy from Lost in Space and the Twilight Zone stuff. He was a kid who always could get under my skin.
Right.
These 2 kids are unbelievable.
So as you said, Martin Stevens is Miles. He didn't really have a big film career. The one film he did before this,
Village of the Damned.
again, perfect casting. This kid is so great. His face is so classic.
There's something about him. He can do so much with his face, and he's
Yeah.
really creepy when he wants to be.
Yes, and then of course Flora, his sister in the movie,
Pamela Franklin.
the great Pamela Franklin.
She's fantastic.
This is her first movie, and she went on to some great films: Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, and another great horror film she's in, The Legend of Hell House.
Yes. Roddy McDowall.
Yeah. So the thing about Pamela Franklin is all of you will recognize her as an adult. This is her first role. She's a young kid. She was in a lot of TV.
She was
also.
born to act because when you see her in this movie,
Yeah.
you can't believe these kids are acting. Mrs. Gross is Megs Jenkins, and she's
Megs-
terrific too.
I love Mrs. Gross in this movie. The word to use for this movie is subtlety. Just the way they shoot it, it takes place at this remote mansion out in the countryside. There's only 4 cast members, basically, living cast members. The governess, Miss Giddens, the housekeeper,
Mrs. Gross.
and the 2 children, Flora and Miles.
Right.
And
That's pretty much it. Okay, so the movie starts out. Well, actually, before the movie starts out, you have a black screen, and you have this little folk tune, "O Willow Will I," and it's this song about lost love. It just gets right under your skin. I saw this when I was about 8 years old with my brother, and we were home by ourselves. My brother is not affected by horror movies. In fact, he says he even likes A Good Nightmare. So, you have this black background and this little girl singing this song, and it's just haunting.
I mean, as a kid, your ears just prick up and your attention's immediately grabbed.
Yeah.
And the singing kind of goes away, and then you hear these natural sounds like birds chirping.
Birds chirping, exactly.
Kind of breeze. And I think the effect of all this is to kind of isolate you. One of the points of the movie is these people are isolated way out in the countryside. This woman's praying. What does she say?
All I want to do is save the children.
And this is the whole
Because the
setup.
praying hands right now, we're in the midst of something
Right.
that's really not good.
No.
So we're going back to the beginning. See, I'm just getting chills talking about this now, Joe, because this movie really got under my skin.
And then we cut back to this wealthy bachelor.
The rich uncle who is, he inherited them, quote unquote, 2 orphan children, he calls them.
Yes.
Miles and Flora. He's in the process of hiring a governess, and the person is Deborah Kerr, who is Miss Giddens.
You can tell she's a spinster. She's older. She's not married. She's a parson's daughter. And she's quite taken by this quintessential wealthy bachelor.
He's dashing.
And he wants nothing to do with these kids. He's basically putting them in her hands and saying, do not contact me. I want nothing to do with it. You're in charge.
So he wants her to take care of these 2 kids out at his large country estate because the previous governess has just recently died.
So, yeah, she's told about Miss Jessel, the governess has died, but she's also told not to broach this with the children.
Especially Flora, the girl, because
Yes.
Flora is very attached to her.
Yes. So she's to go off to this estate. It's called Bly. And to me, it's also a character in this film. The way this house is situated, it's just like out in the remote countryside. And if you could just imagine back in the 1800s, you're sent by horse-drawn carriage out to the country.
The middle of nowhere.
the middle of nowhere. And it's just this
And this is a large estate, man.
It's a creepy old mansion out in the middle of nowhere.
And it has all these different corridors and these creepy, twisted staircases that lead certain back ways to places. And it's all these, once again, these dark shadows.
Kind of weird sculpture.
The sculpture is very creepy. I want to comment on a little bit later on, but yes, the sculpture is unnerving, and it's all over the place.
And the point,
inside the house and on the grounds.
So back to my point, this house just has a character of its own.
Absolutely. And when she first gets there, she wants to walk. She gets out of the coach. She says, "Can I please walk?" So she's walking around, and she's got her, her beautiful garments of the day, the big hoop skirt and whatnot. Yeah. At one point, she's looking off this beautiful lake. Yeah. And there are lilies, pond lilies and whatnot, and all this greenery around. And then you hear this little chilling sound. It's not quite a sound effect. I think it was more like music, but there's some foreboding quality to it.
Yeah.
And then you hear this woman's voice calling for this little girl's Flora, Flora, Flora. Yeah. And you're thinking, well, who's calling this girl? So suddenly, this girl appears in a reflection in the pool of water in the lake, and it's kind of ghostly because you're not seeing her straight on; you're seeing her reflected in the pool of water. Miss Giddens says, "You must be Flora," and she says yes, and she said, "I heard someone calling you."
Yes,
and Flora says, "No one was calling me." Right away, you start to think, there's something going on here that nobody's telling anybody about. Certainly the kids are not telling the governess about.
So it's weird that Flora doesn't admit to hearing the voice, because literally she was right there. So Miss Giddens and Flora walk back to the estate, and they get to the house.
And we meet Mrs. Gross, who's the housekeeper.
She's the typical English kind of working class servant. She never really speaks above her station. She's always agreeable.
Well, she has this quality, and it reminds me of the generation of, say, my parents and my grandparents.
Yeah.
You never really talk about things.
Yeah.
It wasn't right to talk about these things. You just don't bother with that. It'll all go away. And that's how Mrs. Gross is.
Yeah. So we get to the house, and right away, Miss Giddens is taken with the beauty of the house.
Right.
She even, it's much better than she expected, I think she even mentions.
Right.
And Flora is just the most charming little girl. Like all creepy kids in horror films.
Once again, Flora says something along the lines of, "Miles is coming. Miles is coming." And Miss Giddens looks at her and says, "That's not really possible because he's at school." And Flora laughs and as if she knows something that somebody else doesn't know. Shortly after that, here comes a letter in the mail to her, forwarded from the uncle, who doesn't want to look at the piece of mail, just forwards it right to her. I have nothing to do with this. It's from Miles' school.
Yes.
And we see Flora smile as if she knows what's in the letter already. And Miss Giddens opens up the letter and realizes that Miles has been expelled from school, that he is actually coming home. And we see a smile on Flora's face.
Right.
And Miss Giddens looks to her and says, "You said something about Miles coming home. Did you know something about this?" And all she does is smile. Flora, all Flora does is smile. And she's watching this butterfly flitting about. But what's really happening is a spider is eating the butterfly. She just says, "It's a lovely spider and it's eating a butterfly." But she's totally ignoring Miss Giddens' question about how did you know about Miles coming home?
Isn't that so deceptive? It's like you can tell she's kind of...
She knows.
Whether she does or not, but she plays it off. And what's also cool about that scene is Miss Giddens, she's quite taken by the language in this letter. The letter basically says it's impossible to keep him and he's an injury to the others. The whole idea of this story is, what is going on? Is it in this repressed spinster's mind, or is it real? So you can make a case for both in this movie. It's so well done.
Right.
And already she's kind of formulating ideas about these kids based on information she sees and she gets. And this, like, how is a boy an injury to others? She's quite taken with this.
But she seems to look to the better in these kids and say, something's wrong. That doesn't make sense. These are good kids. I love the scene when Mrs. Giddens and Mrs. Gross are in the greenhouse and they're talking about Miles being expelled from school, which Mrs. Gross basically has her same point of view about everything, stuff and nonsense. That can't be possible. Master Miles wouldn't do a thing like that. And they're talking about what exactly is going on here with Miles. There's a shot where we have Mrs. Giddens on one side and Mrs. Gross on the other side, and right in between them, there's this tortured statue.
Yeah.
He's bound in chains and he's twisted and tortured. And this is how the statues give this really creepy overall feeling. All these statues look like there's something wrong with them.
It's like a bad memory or
yes,
something.
That's a very good way of looking. I like that, John. I didn't think of it that way. I like
the
that.
house is just like...
Maybe these statues have been in that house too long that they're really getting contorted and tortured.
That scene in the greenhouse is one long continuous dolly.
Yep.
It goes from one of those characters to the other. Whoever's talking, I think one point Flora walks out a door and she comes around back into the greenhouse. It's really well choreographed.
Jack Clayton does that a lot in the movie where you have somebody in the foreground and you have somebody in the background. And it reminds me of Greg Toland's cinematography from Citizen Kane, where you have those lenses that have that deep focus, where you have this person really close to the lens and they're really crisp, and the person to the back, you can see it. But as they move, somebody moves to the back a little bit more, you're watching the face of the person who's up front. You're getting all the dialogue, but you're keying in on what the reaction is. It's really beautifully done.
And then Miles comes home. They meet him at the station, right? He pulls up and he hands her flowers.
Right.
Like the little gentleman brings her flowers.
Yes.
It's like the seduction begins.
He basically, before anybody can get mad at you, you give him some flowers and say, "Hey, look, a butterfly." So you just do a little sleight of hand with some flowers. If he would have pulled them out of his sleeve, that would have been even better. So she questions him in a very nice, loving manner about, Miles, what exactly happened at school? And he says things like, "It's so good to be home." And she keeps pressing him, not hard, but pressing him, asking these questions. And he just stares out at the scenery and smiles.
Yeah.
And he ignores her, just like Flora did when she was watching the spider devour the butterfly.
But she does say to Miss Gross, when she sees her, charm seems to run in the family. Like she's already taken with him.
Right.
Like he's won her over with his charm.
Yes. The next scene is one scene that is burned into my brain that I will never forget as well. And what's interesting about this film as a film, the horror does not only happen in the dark of night.
Right.
It happens in the bright sunshine of day. Miss Giddens is out in the garden. I think she might be near the greenhouse or something. She's out in the garden. She's got some scissors. She's going to cut some flowers. And she looks up, and in the bright sunlight
there's like glare.
of day, there's glare that comes down. So you're looking at the sun, and this image of this person, this man, walking at the top of this tower. It looks like a medieval castle.
Like the ramparts.
Right. You can't quite see it because of the way it's the sun is hitting your eyes, and it's her point of view shot, and you see the man walk, and he looks down at her and he just stares at her.
Yeah.
And that image to me is one of those images that scared the hell out of me, because it's the light of day.
Yeah.
This is not spooky, scary shadows and dark. This is bright sunshine in the day. And she goes upstairs. She runs to the tower, and she finds the door that'll let her in, and she opens it up, and you hear the sound. You were talking about natural sounds before. Tons of flies. And what that conjured up in me is decay.
Yeah.
Death.
Right.
there are all these flies in this dead area. This room hasn't been open for a long time. What's going on here? And it's very creepy to have that feeling of those flies flying in around there. So it feels like death.
Yeah.
And then she goes up this stairway and makes her way up, and she opens the door to go outside to this top of this tower, and she sees Miles, the boy.
She runs around the tower because she's looking for this guy.
Right.
And she comes across Miles, who's sitting on the ground.
And she says, Miles, who is that man up here? And he said, I've been quite alone.
Yeah.
Once again, the chills go up your spine because you go, no, there was a guy there. Why are you lying about this? Who is this guy?
I just had to go. The thing about the scene is, like, as you said, it's her point of view when she looks up at the tower.
Yeah.
The sun is in your eyes.
Yeah.
It's behind him, so he's almost a shadow, really. Right. And you see him kind of moving.
He's silhouetted, but you can still see his eyes.
Oh, yeah. But just prior to that, we hear, as she's in the garden, after she sees the statue, suddenly it goes quiet, and you hear Flora or somebody humming that frickin' tune again. I'm serious. And again, as soon as you hear that tune, you know something's happening. When she looks up at the tower, she kind of sees the guy, and these pigeons start fluttering.
Yes.
In slow motion, and then she kind of closes her eyes.
It's disorienting to her. Did she really see this thing?
But she closes her eyes because of the glare, and then when she opens them, he's gone.
Right.
So again, there's this weird kind of feeling like, what are we seeing? First of all, you're scared shitless as a kid when you see this. And we're going to keep referring to ourselves as kids. Because I have to say, Bob was talking about this earlier, and I've seen it several times as a kid because it was always on TV. One time I was at my aunt's house. I swear to God, things are going on, and somebody had the TV on in the living room, and I look up, and it's the scene of her in the garden. And
of course it was that scene.
It was just like...
It had to be that scene.
There were images that stick with you. It just like froze me mid-stride. I was like, who put that on? Like, turn that off.
Of all the TV shows to put on.
It's like in the middle of the day. Yeah. I don't want to see this right now.
Ever again.
And then the next scene is, we're going to jump a little, I guess, but the next scene is this great hide-and-seek scene. The kids want to play hide-and-seek, and they're going to run off first. So she goes roaming the house looking for these kids. Again, it's a great sequence because you do get to see the house. Like, I don't know how many sets they built, but she is basically all these beautiful little hallways and nooks. She's looking here or there. And suddenly she gets to this hallway, and it's dark at the end of the hallway. And she's walking down, and she suddenly stops. Things go quiet, and she looks. You kind of see the shadow across the hallway at the very end of the hallway. It's kind of like a woman with an outline of a dress, but you don't quite see it.
With the same kind of that hoop dress of the time.
Yeah.
And she's all dressed in black.
And she just kind of floats across the hallway.
Like, and then she's gone.
And she's gone. And you cut back. It's a really wonderfully edited sequence. As in everything in this movie, it's not like they throw it in your face. Like, it's a quick shot, and then you cut back to her face, and then you see it again, and you cut back to her. And it's almost like yourself.
But it's not like a ghost per se because it's three-dimensional. It just looks like a person just floated across the hallway.
But it's in shadow. And then by the time you cut back to her, it's so fast. You're questioning yourself.
She's not even sure. Yeah.
You're like, what did I just see? Then she ends up in the attic because she hears laughter up there.
Right. Of course, when she opens the door, she has to see this little kind of wobbly, a bobblehead clown tick-tocking back and forth. I mean, it felt very Twilight Zone-y when I saw that.
And of course, when I see a clown in an attic, I'm going to stay, right? No.
It's nodding its head, clicking back and forth, I'm gone.
So she starts creeping around this attic because she's heard voices. She thinks it's the kids. Mm-hmm. And she comes across this little chest, right? And a music box. And she opens the music box.
Well, she knocks it off onto the floor by accident.
And is that, we hear the tune then?
Yes, then the music box engages.
And this is the tune we've been hearing, Flora hum, and we heard at the beginning.
And inside the music box,
very important,
is a photograph. And the glass is broken across the face.
And we kind of see this face. I always thought he looked like Anthony Quinn, a young Anthony Quinn, but it's this little portrait of this guy. I'm just going to say this is important, that she sees his photo.
Why is it important, John?
We'll talk about it later on. So suddenly Miles, behind her, out of the attic, he just comes running up on her.
Right.
He surprises her. Right. And he grabs her around the neck. And he's like a little
You're
kid.
You're my prisoner.
You're my prisoner. And he's like so excited. He's like happy. He's laughing. And like little kids, they get carried away. And he starts he's from behind. He's got her on the neck, and he starts choking.
And she says, "You're hurting me. Stop. You're hurting me."
And he's squeezing. He doesn't hear her.
And harder.
He's like a little puppy almost. He doesn't hear. He's just too wrapped up in the moment.
But he starts doing it more severely, and you start to think to yourself, he doesn't seem like he's playing anymore. He seems like he actually wants to hurt
But
her.
he's like, is he laughing? He's kind of giggling.
He
and
is.
He's like,
it feels like something else is making him go further than he should be going.
he's
here.
not in control of himself.
Exactly.
And then it's like the girl shows up, and it's like your turn to hide.
Right.
She just gets taken up by these kids again. Like, oh,
She
okay.
should be really disturbed. She should probably get in the carriage and go home because this guy, the little boy, was really hurting her. He
Yeah.
could have even strangled her.
But it's like she should have been an adult too, and kind of like
That's
put the
enough.
brake
for now.
on it.
That's enough
But
for now.
they like kind of they're charmed. They work on her, and they're like, now it's your turn. You go hide.
Okay, I'll go play too.
Yeah, and she goes running off. Like you could see, almost like a little girl. It's almost like she's been so cloistered her whole life. She's never really.
That's a good point, John, because that's right. Because now she's having a chance to just kind of just have reckless abandon.
Yeah,
She can just go play with the kids.
She's never had that opportunity before, and so she goes running off.
She goes down to basically the living room. There are many living rooms.
Like a parlor. I think it's a parlor.
So she goes down there and she's going to hide behind the curtains.
Yes.
But she sees her feet sticking out, so she...
Beautiful. I just have to say, that one shot, she looks down and she sees her own feet coming out of the curtains. Just a little detail of that shot to think of it.
Yes.
So she sees her feet and she tucks them back in and gets behind these long curtains.
The way it's framed, you have all this frame to work with. So
Yeah.
she's behind the curtain. She's to the right of the frame. And then there's a space between the curtains where you can see outside. And we see this statue. He's Pan or a satyr or something.
Yeah.
So he's going to get the little horn. So you know he's got a mischievous quality to him. And mostly it's dark shadows outside.
Yeah.
And from the dark shadows, and this is amazingly done. I just got the chills up my spine again. From out of the dark shadows, floats into the light outside the face of this man, the man we just saw in the photograph.
Yeah.
You know, not like boo ghost type. He floats straight up, and you just catch his face in the light. It's so well timed and put together, and he starts coming toward the window. And she catches the attention out of her peripheral vision, and he comes closer and closer and closer. It's terrifying.
And her reaction, she sees it, and it's just like...
abject terror.
She just goes white. And what's interesting is the lighting on her...
Yes.
Suddenly dimmed. Like she's caught in this nightmare.
He removes the light from her face.
Good point. Really nice.
He overtakes it. Yes.
He like takes all the light out of the scene.
Absolutely. He's right next to the glass.
No special effects. I think that's why it works so well.
And her acting. Because you feel the terror. I mean, the way it's set up for this guy coming close. And this guy, she's only
we see it's the same guy as the guy in the photo.
And right now at this point, he's so close to the glass, she's close enough to the glass. She's got, a quarter of an inch of glass?
Yeah.
An eighth of an inch of glass to separate her from this phantom, from this man, from this figure. And what's creepy about him is, in this shot here especially, he looks like every picture I can think of Lucifer. He has those angular cheekbones and that angular nose, and the tone of his face looks like it could be red because
he's got like a beard, like a little bit of a beard, and you can tell he's not like a wealthy guy or whatever. He's like there's a class thing going on in this film. It's not overt, but he's clearly not upper class. And the sound suddenly drops, and you just hear his breathing. It's like this demonic breathing. And then what happens? He just disappears in the blackness.
No expression change, nothing.
And I mentioned this earlier. I just want to say this. Then when she's in the attic and she sees the photo, right? Because you never know who he is until she sees that photo.
Right.
So again, it's this whole play between what's going on. Is it in her mind? But we see it. It's not like a fake ghost.
And you could say, gee, is it in her mind? Because
it could be.
You just saw that photograph.
Yeah.
And it could be creepy because the creepy statues and the lighting. And maybe she's just imagining this thing. So Miss Giddens confronts Mrs. Gross about the man she's seen, and Mrs. Gross says that the man that she describes sounds like the master's valet, but he's dead.
Miss Gross is trying to what did he look like? And he's like handsome and obscene. That's how she explains him. And she actually does then say, I know where I've seen him before. And she refers to the photo. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, after Mrs. Gross is like, but he's dead.
He's dead. The kids
appear
over here, and they're up on the landing of the stairway, and they're laughing hysterically.
Yeah.
They think this is really funny.
Laughing at her, not with her. So then the kids do the play. Right. And Miles, he's got this crown. He's holding this candle, and it's just this beautiful lighting effect on his face. Very theatrical.
And he just looks so intelligent, Miles. And you know he's going to be very sophisticated, and he starts to do this poem. I'm not going to do the whole poem now, but I just want to read a couple lines, John.
Go for it.
Because these are the lines that really got under my skin. And he sings in this very proper British way. He even has a little bit of a lisp to it. It adds a little extra credence to it. And the whole thing is very Poe. Whom shall I love when the moon is arisen? Gone is my lord, and the grave is his prison. What shall I say when my lord comes a-calling? What shall I say when he knocks on my door? What shall I say when his feet enter softly, leaving the marks of his grave on my floor? Oh boy. What's interesting here is, as he's reading this poem that is very chilling and far beyond what this little boy should be reading, the contrast between Miss Giddens and Mrs. Gross is so stark because Miss Giddens is horrified, like we, the viewers, are, and Mrs. Gross is just sitting there smiling, going, oh, isn't he so sweet? And then when he finishes the poem, he turns silently and just stares at Miss Giddens, very much Village of the Damned like.
Yeah, he's got this very knowing.
Oh my God!
This very knowing smile, and
it's chilling.
You get the feeling he's calling out to Quint.
Yes, absolutely.
Obviously,
absolutely.
I mean, it's not subtle in that way, but it's just, and you can see the look on Miss Giddens' face, like she's working up this whole thing in her head where these kids are being drawn to this spirit,
right?
You know, for up to this point, we kind of get more of the connection between Miles and Quint. And now, suddenly, we're out at this pond or lake.
So we're at the gazebo.
And it's clearly just like Giddens and Flora are just having a nice day.
It's a nice summer day.
In the gazebo.
They're well-dressed and it's calm. And even Miss Giddens says, she goes, I'd say it's almost hot. And Flora says, I like it when it's hot. And she's over by the lake. And she asks Miss Giddens a question. She says, Miss Giddens, do tortoises swim? And she says, no, dear, they can't swim. And Flora says, I didn't think so. And she takes the tortoise out from the lake, which is a really sadistic thing to do if she really has an inclination to do it. So you start to say to yourself, what's going on here? And then Miss Giddens looks over into the weeds, and there is this figure of a woman in a black dress. Very much that we saw pass in front of that
black
hallway.
Hair.
I just got the chills. And she's standing there staring.
And this is like
at
30 yards away. She's just like staring right back at them.
Not moving a muscle.
It's almost like a tintype in a sense. You know what I mean? Like that kind of weird frozen moment.
Exactly. Frozen moment. She's out in the middle of the lake.
Yeah.
Where nobody has any business being, in the middle of the lake, just staring at her. She's well-dressed.
Well, think about it. She can't even be there. It's reeds. She's in I think they call them bulrushes, actually. She's in these tall weeds.
You can't stand on that.
Yeah, it's like marsh.
So she is staring at Miss Giddens, and Miss Giddens says, Flora, do you see that?
It's terrifying.
She's in the middle of the reeds like that. And you know what it reminds me of? Very much so. It reminds me of the first Black Sabbath record with the witch who's standing right there by the lake, the body of water with that barn or something in the background. It looks just like it to me. So even when I would see that on somebody's record collection, I go, oh no, it's the Innocents.
Yeah. And then she asks Flora about it. She goes, Flora, do you see that? And then she looks up again and it's gone. She's gone. There's no one there.
Right.
It's like a cut, and you cut back, and she's gone.
Right.
And of course, Flora doesn't know what she's talking about.
Right. Well, Flora does know what she's talking about.
But you don't know.
You don't know for sure. That's true.
So she explains to suddenly she's back with Miss Gross. And she's like, there's two of them. She calls them two of the abominations.
Right, these two abominations.
So she's taken up this, suddenly she feels like she's got this challenge now. These two figures, in her mind, are out to get the kids.
Yes,
they
absolutely.
want to take the kids. And it becomes this kind of, this battle in
absolutely
her head.
It's absolutely a battle, yeah.
You know, she's going to save these kids. She calls them the horrors.
Yes.
And
in typical Miss Gross manner, she chooses every word very carefully and doesn't want to go beyond a certain thing. But we learn that Quint and Miss Jessel have a really twisted S&M-like relationship.
Yeah.
And Quint is the master and she is the subordinate or the slave.
Well, the words, she had no pride, no shame, Miss Jessel. Right. And she would crawl after him. Think about that.
And he would hit her sometimes, and it wasn't like she was hurt by it. She actually was yearning for the weight of his hand. So they have this twisted relationship that Mrs. Gross doesn't really want to talk about, and this only disturbs even more Miss Giddens. And the other thing that Mrs. Gross says is that they were doing things in the light of day in rooms that were meant for nighttime in a bedroom.
She says, used by daylight as if they were dark woods. What an image. How creepy is that?
And the children were watching this. The children are mimicking the things. So what's going on between the brother and sister?
Yeah.
Are they mimicking this sort of stuff?
Well, it's funny. Miss Giddens, who's so horrified, she's like, they didn't care that you saw them? Like...
No.
And she's like, and the children?
Yes.
Like, she can't believe this. I just have to say that scene ends kind of with Miss Gross, a beautiful line. There were too many whispers in this house.
And that's what it's all about. And the whispers still go on.
Yeah, the kids, you kind of get the sense the kids have this secret going on.
Absolutely.
They're not letting Miss Giddens in on it, obviously. No. She doesn't, they're keeping her away.
There's a sequence at night. It's very dark. She has candlestick, and she's walking through the hallway. She was looking for Flora because Flora had disappeared, I believe. That's what it was.
Well, she wakes up, and Flora is not there in the bed.
And she makes her way out to find out where Flora is.
Yeah.
And as she's walking around, we hear, once again, the sound design is amazing.
Look at the frame, and this is one of those scenes where you see this effect where they did darken around her. It's almost like a vignette around her.
It's a similar way that they used to do the matte paintings directly on glass.
Exactly.
And they would block out the frame. They would frame it with those pieces.
The candles, they put 5 wicks in each candle to
really
throw enough light. And it's not like Barry Lyndon where they're just lighting up by candlelight. They didn't quite have that technology with lenses, but the beautiful way the lighting is in these scenes, you can see how they lit these hallways to make it look like it's just candlelight.
But that's brilliant because you're using the light from the candlelight, and you still get that flickering, like you said, flickering candle thing. And she's making her way around, and the sound design is so beautiful, and gets underneath your skin because all these sounds are being heard. All these revelations about Quint and Miss Jessel. The children are watching. The children are watching. And you get that Quint is up to whatever sexual escapades he is with the doors open, and Miss Jessel's not too cool about it. The children are watching. The children, and she says it enough times to say that Quint is just going at it and doing what he wants to do anyway. It's so creepy, John, because you have all these dark hallways and these doors, and some open and some don't, but the voices are there, the voices are there, the voices are here, the voices are there. It's almost like they had, quadraphonic sound or something, It's really incredible.
And so she finally gets back to the bedroom after not finding Flora, and there's Flora.
Flora's there.
At the window.
At the window.
Again, where we saw her earlier in
looking
the movie,
down
into the garden. Right. And Miss Giddens runs up there, and finally we see what she's looking at, and there's Miles down in the garden, just looking up. And where's he looking? She looks where he's looking. It's almost like a Hitchcock scene.
Right.
Action, reaction.
Right.
And she looks up, and he's looking at the tower.
In the garden there's a statue. and it's of a couple embracing. It looks kind of like Rodin's The Kiss.
Right.
So there's something tied to this garden and romance and other things that these kids are fascinated by.
Yeah.
Is that the place where they meet, Miss Jessel and Quint, their spirits or something?
Yeah.
That's the way I looked at it, at least,
So she hustles Miles back to his bed.
Right. The really disturbing part of this scene for me was it's time for Miss Giddens to just basically tuck him in, and that's that. Miles says to her, "Kiss me goodnight." And he reaches around her in this romantic adult manner, grabs her behind the neck and pushes their faces together, and he kisses her really hard on the mouth. And you think, what the heck is that?
And he's pressing against her lips. And you can see by her eyes.
She's trying to pull away,
she's
but he won't let her.
Shocked.
And it seems like he has more strength than this little boy does, because and that's what we're getting at here.
She finally pulls him away, and he lays back on the pillow, and he just gives her this knowing smile at her. Like, he knows. Right. It's a very strange
He knows
scene.
that she knows that she was disturbed by that.
And again, he's like 11. It's like the dawn of puberty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like
but the way he presses himself and does not let go, and her horror is really, really telling.
I don't think they had much of a rating system back then, but no, seriously, that scene caused this film in Britain to have an X rating.
That's interesting, because it's a very disturbing scene to see a little boy kiss a woman on the mouth.
And it's all about his intention, right? I mean, parents kiss their kids on the mouth or whatever, but the intention in this is just so...
pure sexuality.
Wow.
It was a sexual intent. No doubt about it.
There is a lot going on in this movie,
yes.
I just have to tell you.
But it's the influence of Quint.
Yeah.
It's Quint's way of just getting under her skin.
Yep.
And he's using the boy to do it.
And then the next thing is this scene where Miles is playing the piano, and he's kind of distracting Ms. Giddens. And then she looks, suddenly Flora's gone.
And we find her at the gazebo again.
So she's alarmed. She goes looking for Flora, and there she is by the gazebo.
And she's dancing to the music box.
And of course, the rain's coming down by then.
What are you doing here?
What are you doing
I always come here to dance, to be alone.
And what happens? She looks across the Miss Giddens, and you look across, and you
there's
see
Miss Jessel in the middle of the weeds with her black dress, standing
even spookier because you're looking through the raindrops.
And this rain is coming down.
It's
and
like
she's
a curtain.
not moving a muscle. She's just standing there like a statue and staring at Miss Giddens.
I'm at the bus stop in the rain. I can't move enough to get away from the raindrops. She's just dead still.
Yeah, she's dead still, all right.
And I have to say, I don't know if this is intentional, Miss Giddens is also in a black dress.
Yes, that's the first time we see it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's weird,
yes,
in this funeral dress in a way.
Exactly.
Like, what? It's beautiful.
And she confronts Flora and she says, who is that person out there? She wants to make Flora say this name to release her from the control of this Miss Jessel.
Exactly. In her mind, if she can get the kids to admit to seeing these specters, these ghosts, that's how she could break this possession.
But unless she can get her to face it and name it, this influence will not go away.
So she grabs Flora and she forces Flora to look.
And she's hysterical at this point.
She starts losing it.
And here comes Mrs. Gross.
And of course,
to screw it all up. Let's not talk about it. She holds her and comforts her and looks at Miss Giddens like, what is wrong with you? What kind of a thing is that to do to a poor child? And Flora just turns to Miss Giddens and says, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. And Miss Giddens says to Mrs. Gross, you saw it too.
Yeah.
And she said, I didn't see anything. And I want to go over to Mrs. Gross and go, what are you talking about? Of course you saw that.
Right there. No one sees her.
You don't see that every day, do you? Too much dusting?
But it's interesting how Miss Gross is kind of like, now you got to take her side too. You're like, what is this woman talking about?
Yes.
Like,
it does give you that feeling at that moment in time. I have my point of view, but it does give you that feeling at that time that, wait a second, maybe that was really a cruel thing to do. Maybe she really shouldn't have disturbed this poor little girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't feel that way, but it does leave enough of a question in you when you see her expression, Mrs. Gross. And she does it, once again, she's a terrific actress because she really walks the line the whole time with this kind of reality and what you don't talk about.
So now Miss Giddens, she's going to order Miss Gross to take Flora away from Bly to London.
Right.
She wants to be alone with Miles.
Right.
She's going to get to the bottom of this.
Right.
She's certain Miles is on the brink of confessing.
She wants to have this, basically the showdown. She wants to have Miles to herself so she can have him confront what's going on here
and
release him.
But you can just tell by the look on her face is like, I do not like the way this is.
I don't like this at all.
Why did she say something? So we're left alone with Miss Giddens and Miles.
And then we have that scene in the greenhouse where they're talking at night. And she questions him, why were you expelled from school?
Well, to her, that's like the kernel of a lot of things. Like, what went on at school? She just wants to know. Go ahead.
He gets pressed and goes back and forth, and his voice changes. I don't mean the actual voice itself, but the way the words are phrased and come out of his mouth, they change at different points in the sequence. Sometimes he really sounds like an adult, and he has a very sophisticated, snooty manner.
Right.
And other times he's just a little boy. So you can feel the pull of this spirit of Quint in him pushing back. And finally she gets Miles to admit that he said things, probably in Quint's words, and hurt things like something Quint might hurt at the school, and that it disturbed and frightened the other boys.
This is a classic wide shot again, where the Miles is in the foreground on the right, I believe, and she's in the background. They're both in focus.
Yep.
It's kind of like a metaphor, like they're far apart, but in this scene, they're very close the way the focus is. It's a really nice wide shot.
That's a good point. Yeah, absolutely.
And she wants to know, when did you first see and hear such things?
Shall I tell you who taught you these things? And then we see, in the window to the left of Miles, Quint's face staring in, angry. It's not that clear because the window is fogged because it's warm in the greenhouse. So he comes up and you see this kind of ghostly image of Quint's face looking basically over Miles' shoulder as she's talking to Miles. He can't really express what it is he's trying to say. And then she says, shall I tell you who taught you these things? So she literally has him backed up against the wall.
But he starts screaming at her. He calls her
a hussy.
A damned hussy, a damned dirty hag.
I knew you as soon as you got here. I could tell you're not fooling anybody. He really unloads on her, and these are words coming directly from Quint into his mouth. And then he starts to laugh, and you see Quint laughing at the same time, so you can see who's pulling the strings of this marionette. And then finally, Miles can't take it anymore. He has the tortoise in his hand, Rupert, and he throws it to the glass. It kind of breaks the spell, and he runs out into the garden. It's a section of the garden. It kind of reminded me of like a Roman gladiator.
Yeah.
A circle of some sort where and these statues are standing witnesses.
It looks like an arena.
Exactly. It's small, but that's how the hedge is made out to be. And now this is where the battle's going to be won or lost.
So she chases him, catches him in the middle of this garden. The camera kind of twirls at one point. And you see all these statues.
The camera work's amazing.
Yeah. And then suddenly, up on a pedestal is Quint.
Right.
It's such a great shot. Yes. Another great shot.
And his hand is in the left-hand corner of the frame, and it looks almost like claws or something. He's ready to pounce on them.
It's almost like Quint is reaching out for Miles.
Now, I'm going to stop you here.
Okay.
Because we think you should see it for yourself. There is a really nifty ending to it that we're going to leave the viewer to see for themselves.
Yeah, it's so good a film. We want to entice you to see it. We implore you.
That's it.
It's a great film. Go see it. Well, that's all the time we have this week.
We'd like to thank our friend Glenn Ornowitz for his music.
And of course, our listeners for tuning in.
So join us next week for another episode of
Film Detour.
If you like our show, please recommend us to your friends. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play, and leave a review.
Go to our website at filmdetourpodcast.com to leave comments or email us with questions. You can also visit us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.